Hi, everybody. I am Michael Munson with Forge, and I'm really happy to have you all here tonight. I'm happy to have Stephania here from Defend Yourself, and we are going to have a really fun, probably an hour and a half, maybe an hour. We'll find out how long we go tonight. But a session that talks about self-defense and empowerment, and it will be a really engaging time, and it's going to be kind of a sneak preview to some of the things that we have coming up later this year, also with Defend Yourself. Just to kind of do a little bit of housekeeping, again, I'm Michael Munson with Forge, and I use he, him pronouns or they, them pronouns. And just for a visual description for folks, I am a white appearing person with a round face and brown and gray hair, glasses, and a blue-ish shirt on tonight. And behind me is a black background. Just a quick sentence on who Forge is for those of you who are unfamiliar. We are a 28-year-old national trans anti-violence organization, and we're mostly headquartered in Milwaukee, but we have staff on both coasts. So we're excited to be spanning our wings a little bit, spreading our wings a little bit with a new person on the East Coast. The format for the night is going to be really relaxed. We're going to do kind of an interview style. I get to ask the fun questions and Stephania gets to answer them. So it'll be a really relaxed but informative session. Feel free to add comments in the chat as we move along or questions, and we'll make sure that there's time at the end for plenty of time for questions at the end. So let's get started. Stephania, I'm really happy that you're here tonight. I'm happy that we can meet this way, face-to-face, sort of face-to-face. I've known Lauren from Defend Yourself for many, many years, and it's great to have somebody from her team, from your team here tonight. So I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself a little bit and share a little bit about Defend Yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Stephania Mahdi. I use she, her pronouns. I am a trainer from Defend Yourself. I've been a trainer for about 7 years now. During the coronavirus pandemic, we've primarily been training via Zoom in this format. So we're learning how to adapt to this new environment, teaching these skills to really an international audience. We've taught so many different people from throughout the world over the last couple of years. Defend Yourself is a DC-based organization that hosts workshops and trainings in empowerment, self-defense, and active bystander intervention. We teach locally, so we're going back to in-person training, and we're still doing our Zoom classes for people that are more comfortable with the social distancing. And Defend Yourself empowers people, especially those targeted for violence, to include women, the LGBTQ community, gender nonconforming people, to protect themselves and to stand up for themselves. Sticking up for others as well is also a key element of our training. We aim to create a world where people can be fully themselves and be fully present. We do that through several different ways, which is self-defense, which is protection of yourself, sticking up for others, which we do in our active bystander training, and to create a world where you can be fully yourself. Those are all really key elements of what Defend Yourself, the skills that we're bringing in our classes. Our classes are typically 2 to 4 hours, to include the 3-week class that you're taking, which I think will be about an hour and a half for each class. We also have an intensive 10-week class that really teaches, lets us get deeper into our verbal and physical self-defense. And we train a variety of demographics and communities. We've taught everyone from Girl Scouts, women and children at Wounded Warrior, LGBTQ organizations, college students. I mean, really, it's a really a holistic community that we teach. It's not just one type of, we're not just teaching women, we're teaching all sorts of people how to stand up for themselves and to defend themselves.
Excellent, thank you. And as I mentioned, and as you know, Stephania, we are an anti-violence organization, and I know that you do work in DC with the Anti-Violence Project there. And I guess, I'm curious about if you could share a little bit more about how you work with the DC AVP and Defend Yourself Connect, how those two go together for you.
Yeah, so the connection, so I have been a volunteer. I've been the chair of the DC Anti-Violence Project for about 7 years now. And our mission is to advocate and create community and spaces and resources for people that have been affected by violence, primarily the LGBTQ community. And so we do that through education, training, free counseling services for groups and individuals, and we advocate for people that have been affected by hate crimes. So at the root of anti-violence for us and for Defend Yourself is moving from the victim and moving into the survivor mode of your experience. That's why we really use the term survivor, because we're all, most of us are survivors of some kind of violence or trauma. And the root of that is empowerment and self-defense, having skills, knowing how to use them, and knowing how to defend yourself if need be. And that's not just through physical self-defense, it's also through verbal self-defense, setting healthy boundaries, being aware of red flags, when to walk away from relationships or people. Those are all really important skills that can assist with protecting yourself and feeling safer in spaces.
That's really cool. Thank you. And you just brought up something which, when I was a kid, I always thought about defense classes, self-defense classes as like, oh, you have to hit somebody, you have to be physical with somebody. And that's not what it's about. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about what are the basics? What are some things like empowerment self-defense? Like how might that be different than other forms of self-defense? Where does that go for what you're teaching, what you're sharing?
Yes, so empowerment self-defense is really different from martial arts. A lot of people, for myself, I'm not trained in martial arts, but I have been trained in certain skills like these pressure points that you could use to maybe defend yourself. And these are all really complicated, to be honest. Some of the martial arts have, skills that people acquire over many, many, many years. And with empowerment self-defense, we're teaching skills that are literally for everyone. They're very simple. And I think that's the key to our classes, is that the skills are simple enough that if you're in a stressful situation and your brain goes into that fight, flight, or freeze, you can move past that freeze into the skills that we use that are just really using the skills that you have, what's on your body, in a safe way to inflict the most harm on a person that is inflicting violence on you, or potentially inflicting violence on you. And so I think that's a really important aspect of our training, is that it's simple, it's effective. We teach you how to use your body in the right places and strike that person in the place that's going to cause the most harm, and then of course get to safety. We teach all different types of bodies and abilities. We have taught people that use wheelchairs. We have taught people with all sorts of different abilities. And a lot of times people are curious or nervous to see if I'm a short person and somebody is really large, how can I do anything that's effective? And we say, of course, there's definitely things on a person. For instance, your nose and your feet are very vulnerable. So you could have the biggest muscles in the world, but your nose is you can't do any push-ups for your nose. So there's ways that you can hit somebody and affect harm that is very powerful for all different types of people. And I really like to stomp that point home, that it's really for all levels and abilities, and we keep it simple enough for you to learn and use in the most critical times. Our techniques are also not thinking about what you don't have, but tapping into what you already do have. So using your voice, your face, your hands, your elbows, your knees, and your feet are all things that are available to you. You don't have to necessarily think about grabbing something or carrying a weapon. You have a lot of tools right there on your body that you can use if you need to. And as I mentioned previously, we do use verbal self-defense as well, which I think people often overlook the verbal side of empowerment, using your voice, finding your voice, establishing healthy boundaries, and really all of your relationships are all skills that you can use to prevent potential violent or harmful situations or relationships.
Excellent, thank you. I was wondering if I can ask a couple of questions that stray off of that general question. And you and I had exchanged a little bit about disability, and you mentioned about size, and within trans communities, it seems like, I don't want to say unfortunately, but a lot of trans men or trans masculine folks tend to be really short, and a lot of trans women are really tall. I don't know how the world works that way, but I mean, you've just addressed some of that, which is like, it works for all sizes and bodies. The one piece that I wanted to ask you about was, there seems to be a lot of folks that are in the trans community that are neurodiverse and may have some challenges, either being physical or being verbal with folks. And I'm just curious if you have any, off the top of your head, comments about folks that have some neurodiversity and how that plays out in their ability to respond.
Yeah, so you don't have to necessarily be verbal, and you don't necessarily have to be strong to communicate. We teach something, and I'll go over some of this later, which is using your voice, body, and your face, which is a nonverbal self-defense that can be very effective in letting other people around you know that something harmful may be happening, and letting that person that is harming you know that what they're doing is inappropriate. So you may not be able to speak, but you can use your hands and put them up in this way, and other people can see that something's happening. If you're positioning your body in a certain direction, if you turn around and face somebody and put your hands up and use your face with a consistent message, as simple as like get back, or to just yell. These are all some of the ways that you can not be as verbal or not as physical, but still send a pretty clear message that something's happening that you don't want to happen.
Cool. Thank you for the indulging my kind of off the cuff question. And I know that's probably we have a long discussion about how that plays out for folks with different processing needs and styles. If we look at the world right now, it's a really, really tough place to be in our country right now, in our world right now, for folks that are marginalized, so folks of color, folks that are trans or gender diverse. It's just a really tough time. And a lot of trans folks are really living with that uncertainty of kind of walking through the world and fearing a lot of violence that is happening. So I guess I'm wondering if people have lost their confidence. They might have had more confidence at some point, but are really losing some of their feeling of like, I can do this, I can be out in the world at some way. What can people learn from empowerment self-defense? How will that help them if they're struggling with their confidence or living in fear?
I think one of the key takeaways from our classes is that you establish what you have the right to. And that's a really powerful thing to know, that you have the right to be heard, you have the right to feel safe, you have the right to feel respected in all spaces. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that I use these skills in really like all of my relationships. I use them with my family a lot. I use them with loved ones. I use them with coworkers. I use them in every space. And so learning that you have the right to self-respect, to be heard, to take up space is very powerful in establishing safety and empowerment and in a sense of self-defense. Our skills teach how to better navigate the world. Like I said, the verbal self-defense is really about finding your voice, setting healthy boundaries, maintaining relationships. It's not always like yelling at someone and telling them no, but setting your boundaries in a way that you know that you have to still have a relationship with that person. It's also really important part of empowerment. If someone is talking about your body in ways that you don't like, you learn skills to address that behavior. If someone is coercing you into a relationship or a sexual relationship that you're not comfortable with, you learn skills to use your voice, to center your needs, and to establish boundaries, which is really important. And ultimately, if you are unsafe or in a situation that is violent or may lead to violence, you have the right to defend yourself. You can learn that you can do it, you have the skills to do it, and you have the right to do it. And whether that's punching someone in the face, a knee to the groin, stomping them on their foot, getting out of a chokehold, or just establishing a healthy boundary. These are all things that you have the right to do. And after our classes, you can add these skills to your toolbox and know that you can do them.
Excellent. I'm wondering, could you say a little bit more about it? So I think I got the three main things that you might have said, which was you have a right to take up space, you have a right to be heard, you have a right to be safe. Was there another one that I missed in that list?
Safety to include to defend yourself as well.
Cool. Could you say more about all of those? I think that sometimes we have, like in our culture, we have a hard time taking up space. If we were raised in a certain way, we have a hard time saying, well, my voice is worth being heard. Could you just share a little bit more about each of those pieces of rights?
Sure. You have the right to feel safe, I think, is really important. And when I think about all of this, I'm not just thinking about in public spaces where you have stranger danger or people that you don't know. This is really, I mean, we teach how to have difficult conversations with your family. So safety is really in every part of your life. And safety can include using your voice and setting boundaries in your relationship. You know, your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Telling someone that something they're doing is not appropriate is an element of safety. Knowing when to walk away from a potentially harmful relationship is part of your safety. And knowing that you can, if you're a shorter person, fight off a person who's much larger than you, and get to safety is all a part of all different types of safety that we try to think of holistically. Taking up space, I think, is challenging, especially for, you know, people that have been historically marginalized, women, LGBTQ people, people of color. We're not used to navigating this world and taking up space, but really knowing that you have the right to do that. You know, you don't, learning how not to say I'm sorry constantly is also a really important skill set. Many of us are constantly in this like, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Moving away from that and just saying no, period, that's it. No, is a part of taking up space. It's knowing that you don't have to constantly explain or apologize yourself is a really important element in just saying, like, I have the right to take up this space and not explain, you know, why I'm here or the importance of me being here. And I forgot maybe the last one, but I think setting healthy boundaries is also a really, really critical to your safety and taking up space. One of the skills that we teach is just knowing how to set boundaries, especially with people that you want to have relationships with. I mentioned like someone that's talking about your body. That often happens sometimes with family members or people that you're close with that, you know, feel they have the right to talk about your body, and knowing how to say to somebody like, I don't appreciate you talking about my body, and staying on your agenda and not getting into a long-winded conversation, but setting a boundary, establishing that boundary, and kind of holding that line is really important when it comes to just kind of your safety and empowerment.
Excellent, thank you. And I think this is one of those things that, like, you know, as a layperson, I don't tend to think about those things as self-defense, as part of like this whole package of self-defense. So I think that's why I kind of was asking you to kind of go in more detail, because I think that that's outside of what most people associate with, I'm going to defend myself and have to be tough. And it's like what you're saying is like about this, you have a right to have these things, to do these things. And that's really, really powerful. Really powerful.
And we begin our training with a threshold of violence, and we go through different scenarios that something as benign as somebody constantly asking to look at your phone, to someone sending you an inappropriate picture or taking your picture, someone that threatens harm against an animal or your pet, all the way up to sexual assault and murder or harm, and ways to navigate at those spaces where it's something's like, oh, well, this person always wants to, you know, see my text messages when I come home. That's something small. But those are ways that you can start to set boundaries and say, no, I don't want you to do that, because the escalation of violence happens at that smaller scale. It doesn't necessarily start with someone, grabbing you by your neck. It's will often start with something more benign. So we do go through the threshold of violence. It's really all inclusive so that you're able to identify harmful behaviors before they escalate.
Yeah, thank you. So we both mentioned a couple times that Forge and Defend Yourself will be doing, well, Defend Yourself is going to be doing, we'll be hosting a 3-session course, and we'll probably be repeating that a couple of times over the next year. So that'll be the getting deeper into things. But I'm wondering if there are some things that you can share with us that we could experience or practice here today, so people can feel like they've left with like, I have a skill now that I didn't have before.
Sure. We can start with verbal self-defense. That's always a great place to start. So verbal self-defense is really using your voice, your body, and your face to send a clear message. When we're setting a boundary with somebody or we're telling someone what we don't want, we need to be very clear in our communication. So not saying I'm sorry, or not kind of like, no, it's okay. Instead of moving from that, saying no. And I'm using my hands. So your voice and your face and your body are sending a clear message. So the first thing we do is we move from whatever we're doing to standing in front of the person squarely, and using your hands to communicate a message. So this is kind of like our starting place with self-defense, is 2 hands to your body. And this is important because if you need to move from verbal self-defense to physical self-defense, you're already kind of in a place where your hands are guarding you and you can use the strikes if you need to. But also just lets the person know when you're talking to them that, hey, this is serious. I'm not, we're not playing around. So using your voice, your body, and your face to send a clear message is really the foundation of verbal self-defense. And so it can be saying, no, get back, leave me alone, get your hand off me, and repeating that thing until the person stops the behavior. So if someone says, you're saying no, and they respond with, oh, why are you acting like that? Leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. Trying to disengage with that person's behavior and staying on your own agenda and not getting drawn into that person's agenda is really critical when we're discussing verbal self-defense, to send a clear message. And keep it simple. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to go into a long dialogue. Just, no is a sentence. It's enough. Get back, leave me alone are all really great starting places for verbal self-defense. And moving from verbal self-defense into physical self-defense, you're still using your voice, which is that starting place. And now you're maybe having to use a physical self-defense. So one of our foundational strikes is our hammer fist. And so in our training, we want to focus on the parts of your body that you can use to strike someone and stay safe. So starting with this part of your hand being the part of your body you use to do a punch, not this part of your hand because you'll break your fingers and you won't be able to engage, but this part of your hand is very strong and you can use it in many different ways to do strikes to the nose, to the temples, to the throat. Let's just start with those, the nose, the temple, and the throat, which are all places, like we said, somebody can be an extreme bodybuilder, but if you hit them on their nose, which is some spot, they're gonna fall over. They're gonna have a moment where they have to collect themselves. And that's giving you just enough time to hopefully run and get away. And that's another critical part of our self-defense, is that a prolonged fight, I don't know, I'm not a huge fighter, but I've been in different fights and training, and like fighting for 1 minute is really long time. We don't advocate for you to get into a long, prolonged fight. Hit somebody hard enough and strong enough that they're kind of disabled for enough time that you can get to safety. It's really one of the key pieces of our training. We can teach, some ground fighting and some different types of strikes, but all with the goal of like hitting one times or several times hard enough to have that person kind of bend over or, be in so much pain that you can run to safety is really, really critical point of our self-defense. It's yell, fight, run is actually on our flyer. So you're yelling, you have to fight, and then running to safety. And we talked about safety before, and there's physical safety, which, running to a safe space, running to a crowd of people and yelling and saying, help, I need help, using your voice. And also safety in, maybe reaching out to a therapist, maybe reaching out to a friend or a family member that can assist you through a hard time, or all the different types of safety that we think about as well. So those are 2 skills. The verbal is voice, body, face, voice, and send a clear message. And the second is the hammer fist strike. And the best place I would think I would start is the nose, coming down on the nose like this, which would look like this, coming down on someone's nose really hard and saying no or get back, using your voice as well. It's those 2 skills that we can teach in just a couple of minutes.
Right. And what you said before too is really interesting to me, at least, that, that by being loud and verbal, it's going to alert other people. And that
Yes.
word of no is going to be heard by others if there are others around. So, which is something that I hadn't really thought about, of like, it's raising attention as well as you taking action, which is really cool. I have a zillion questions that came off of what you just said, like, from a disability framework of like, well, people can't always run, or what if people can't reach somebody's nose? I'm wondering if you could offer something for somebody, like if somebody is in a chair or if somebody can't reach somebody's face, is there another point lower, or another way that they can engage?
Yes, absolutely. So you have all of these tools that are in your hands, which are many actually. And so when you think about all the things that you can do with your hands is many. So you have your fist, and you may not have your feet, but you do have your fist, you do have your voice, and hopefully you have a way to get away. But one of the things that we talk about with a situation is if someone wants to harm you, typically, even if they're, like, say 6'4" and I'm 5'1", they're gonna have to reach down to get me. So when they're attacking you physically, and they're coming down towards you, you have the opportunity to hit them in their nose, hit them in their temple or their throat, and do it repetitively enough time to get away. There's also other key parts of the body that you can hit if you can't reach somebody's nose. A good one is the groin. You can do a hammer fist to the groin at a certain angle that can be just as effective as the nose. You can do a hammer fist to the knee, or the knee, or to the shin, which can be effective. You can also, if maybe you're in an environment where it's more in a home, you can do a hammer fist to the top of the foot, which can also be just as debilitating. So there's definitely parts of the body. We think of the face, the groin, the knees, and the feet as the key parts of the body that you can hit. And you don't always have to use your feet. You can use your hands as well to hit any one of those areas.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you have a number 3 that you want to share, a third skill or technique? You can say no too.
I think I did have. Okay, so
or maybe
a self-defense technique. I think that's all for now. I'll probably think of one in a second.
Okay, that's totally good.
Well, I'll say one that I think is that we have often in classes, and this is for people kind of get into that freeze, is when they get into the tunnel zone. So what the key thing that I use in training is, like, say somebody is choking, which is like one of the scariest things in the world, right? People often get very focused on having that person release their hands, or if someone's grabbing you from behind, you can get very focused and very, the anxiety peaks. And so what I always say is, if someone is choking you, like, that's super scary. Like what I said previously, don't think about what you don't have, think about what you do have. Focus less from getting their hands off of your neck and thinking, okay, they have my throat, but I still have my hands. I can hit them in their nose and hard enough that they will release that chokehold and I can hopefully get to safety. So it's always thinking about moving from, oh my gosh, fear, 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 shock, this place of frozen, to like taking a deep breath and saying, okay, what do I have? What do I have? Still have the tools that are available to me are also really, really critical when you're thinking about fear, because fear can be really, I'm a freezer. When I get super scared, I tend to freeze up. And so I like to think like if I just take a breath and just kind of like let my body reset, I know I can find some tool available to me that I can use.
That's really cool. I'm a freezer as well. So that was a really good example, because I think those of us who, almost all of us have trauma in our history, and trans and non-binary folks have a lot of trauma. I don't want to, rank our hierarchy of that, but, freezing is a really common response for people, and that's normal and it's okay. And like you just said, if you've got, some tools that will work, like hitting somebody in the nose, that's something that you could focus on. So take a breath and then, focus on the what you can do, which is really, really, really cool. So before we kind of move into questions, and I see that there's one already, which is great. So people can start thinking about the questions that they'd like to ask. Could you share a few things that you think are the most important skills that people can learn in your class? I know you've talked about some of the actual skills, but maybe more of the what people kind of take away from classes?
Sure. And so we talked about safety, which I think is really important, and that's physical safety and your mental health as well, which I think can't be underscored enough, is that, you have to take care of yourself. That's really important. And also building confidence. If something happens, you have the right and the skills to do something, and we provide those skills to give you a course of action. And using your voice is really important as well. Often in our classes, people struggle with finding their voice and using their voice for a lot of different reasons. Learning how to make other people uncomfortable, which is kind of powerful, like saying no and centering your own needs, and not constantly being in this place of, trying to make everyone else comfortable, is really important skill that I walked away with when I was just a student in these classes. And one of the really impactful moments after a class, I had a young person come and tell me, they said, I never knew I had the right to say no. And I was I almost moved to tears, because of the power in that statement, that this person didn't know that they could say no to something. Just thinking about your body and your space, knowing that you can say no is really important. And that leads me to, setting boundaries. This is a way that I have learned to empower myself, is that when you set a boundary with someone, and your boundary is something simple as, I don't want you to do whatever, and someone disrespects that boundary, you are now empowered to make decisions, if you can, on how you choose to engage with that person. And knowing that if you tell someone like, I don't want you to yell at me, which is a very simple request, right? I don't want to be yelled at. I don't want to be cursed at. And someone continues to do that. They're showing you that level of disrespect. And you can now make a decision on whether to stay in that situation or leave that situation. And I say that in all contexts. It can be, sometimes you have to step away from family members, friends, set boundaries with coworkers, relationships. It's really the totality of your life that you can learn to, set these healthy boundaries.
That's excellent. Thank you. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share before we move into some questions?
I'm excited to take questions. So let's see what comes up.
Let me read the first question that we have that's in the Q&A pod, which says, hey, I have not heard distance being mentioned. I've always been instructed that distance should always be number one in self-defense before getting into strikes. If you can, stay out of the striking range, and when it's clear you need to, run away. I think it would be really important to mention this as a step between verbal and striking, because it avoids striking. Can you go into that more? Good
Sure.
question.
Creating space is really important. I'm glad that you mentioned creating space, because if you're in a situation, that's hostile, it's best to create space between yourself and that person. If you can't create space, if you are on a bus or well, in DC, we have a metro, or you're on the street and someone is blocking your way, or they're cornering you or trapping you and you can't create space. That's when we move from the verbal self-defense, because you can't create the space, to a physical self-defense if you feel that that's the best way for you to go about it. Sometimes we also have something we teach in the class, which is go along, which is kind of like go along until you get to a safer space. If someone is doing something inappropriate and you can't get away, you can't create that space, kind of go, going along until you can get to a safer environment is also important as well. So yes, I do agree. And we do go over this deeper in the classes that, if you're using, you've exhausted your verbal to a certain extent, you can't create that space. You may have to escalating into a physical strike. But if you can create space, of course, create that space between yourself and the person. So it doesn't, like I said, we do not advocate that you go straight into a fight. Fighting is not safe. And it can be a traumatic experience in itself. So there's ways that we can hopefully get around having to do that. And we like to think of self-defense as something that you're as the last result, basically.
Great. Thank you for the question and that really great answer. And as we're waiting for folks to think of good questions, which I'm sure that there will be some, I wanted to kind of follow up with that question with, I think a lot of us are wanting to live in a nonviolent world, and we think of any form of physical interaction as violent or a place that we don't want to be. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about, how do we live or create a nonviolent world, recognizing that there are people out there that we may need to fend off, either verbally or with space or physically. How does that kind of, I don't know if that, maybe that's not your worldview either, but how can folks kind of reconcile the desire to be nonviolent and have self-defense?
Yeah, as a member of an anti-violence project, I really dislike violence. But unfortunately, we are in an environment where it happens. One of the things that we do at the DC Anti-Violence Project is we advocate for survivors of hate crimes. And in DC, we have pretty high hate crimes. The LGBTQ people experience the most hate crimes in DC. So you have people that are out living, taking up space, and people are, either saying harmful things to them or doing harmful things to them. So I think it's kind of a reality that we live in until we have real, like a radical change in this country and in our communities. And I would hope to see it, but right now, I don't think we're there yet. But one of the things that I often tell people, especially that are, happen to be on the street and experiencing violence, is sometimes, and this is a de-escalation technique, it's really important to kind of creating safe spaces is, I was sitting on a panel for hate crimes. There's a hate crime that happened in DC against a large organization, LGBTQ organization, and people were really fired up. They didn't want to be nice. They wanted to defend themselves. They wanted to take action. They didn't want people to feel that they could step on them. And I understand that frustration, definitely understand that frustration. However, there are times where safety is really important, where it could feel right to tell somebody, you know what I'm saying? Tell them, how you feel, in that moment, if they're saying a slur or something. And I also say, but I also really want people to get home. I want you to be safe. So sometimes when you see someone that's at this elevated space where they're, using harmful words or being really aggressive, it's not always the time to be assertive or to even defend yourself. Sometimes your safety is really critical, and kind of learning a skill to, take that deep breath and recognize that the situation can be harmful, and kind of learning skills. And we do teach this in our, I do teach these de-escalation skills in our bystander intervention, of just saying, like, let me find a way to get out of this situation safely and safely for others that are around me as well, which I think is really critical. We teach assertiveness, and we also teach a de-escalation technique, which I think is equally valuable when you're wanting to create safe spaces. It may not always feel like the right thing to like be nice to someone that's being very offensive to you, but it can be the safest thing for yourself and others as well.
That's great. Thank you. And that was I think that's a really hard question, a hard challenge to find an answer to for each person individually. Let me go to the chat first and then the Q&A pod. So Laurie, who's on our staff, asked about explaining more about the trainings, the 3-part trainings. And Stephania, I'm guessing that you don't know a lot of what's going to happen in there. Is that correct? Or do you know?
I don't know exactly. I'm not sure who's going to be teaching. We have so many amazing trainers that we all kind of teach different ways. We teach the same things, but in different ways. We will definitely be going over, we call it our clothesline of the threshold of violence. We start off with building the skills foundational with the verbal self-defense and really kind of using your voice collectively as a group, not just in isolation, but really like standing in front of the camera and telling your family that you're going to be yelling, and really kind of like finding your voice. There will definitely be some of that. We will probably spend a lot of time going into different physical strikes and actually doing them. Unfortunately, we are doing Zooms, but you can still practice at home. You know, you can really see how it feels to do it. We want there to be a certain level of muscle memory in our training. And I'm pretty sure that they will go over some de-escalation techniques as well, some bystander intervention skills that are really important, and especially with, forward-facing community organizations like yourself, where you need to get some skills to lower the temperature in different environments. So I'm not sure who's training you, but I'm pretty sure they will be covering those key elements.
I'm glad you had an answer to that. And I don't think Lauren is sure who's going to be training either. So I know she has one person in mind, and a second is being recruited. So thank you for offering that, because I'm sure that those will all be included. And I'm really happy to see in the chat someone is mentioning they're in Oregon with an anti-violence project, and they're having you all do some training out there, which is really, really great to hear. So another question in the chat, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So are there any nationwide resources for people with disabilities or individuals who identify as BIPOC, trans, or non-binary with disabilities and or hearing loss for self-defense empowerment?
That is a great question. I'm not sure about the people, like the specific needs for every group, I'm sure are very different. We have trained people with physical disabilities. Many of our trainers have physical disabilities. And we are in spaces where, it's BIPOC, LGBTQ. So I know that every demographic has certain needs, but I'm not sure right now of resources that I could provide for all of those different sets, but I'm sure that we can assist, especially in a class. We have these questions come up, and we do have homework often in our classes, which is, practice some of the skills, and we provide resources after each class as well. So I'll be sure to make a note to have those resources as provided as links for the classes, for after those classes.
That's great. And just to add a follow-up for our 3-part series, there will be more time. People will be on camera. People will be able to have more interaction and ask some of those questions. It's my understanding, at least, so that people, if they say, I have this type of disability, how can I adapt this? That the trainers will be able to help work through that as well. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. So maybe I should kind of talk about how we do our training. We are on Zoom. We would like to have everyone's camera on if possible, so that it can be interactive. We're used to teaching in person, but now we're teaching virtually. And we have, of course, a lesson plan that we're going through, but we always encourage people throughout the class to raise your hand, ask questions. Just, don't have to raise your hand, just unmute yourself and, ask a question. It's very interactive. We want, we're not necessarily the subject matter experts in the room. you know, everyone is coming to a place where they've had to survive, you know, so we really use the collective experiences of the class to build the skills. It's not just us talking to you, it's us posing questions as well and saying like, what have you used to survive, you know? It's really a group experience. It's not it's PowerPoints. There's a lot of interaction, and there's a lot of times we even go into breakout sessions as well to have smaller conversations and then come back to the group to talk about what you discussed. Like I said, there will be some physical stuff. So we get on camera and we show our feet and our hands, and there will be some yelling and punching, and you know, so have some water available to you because I work up a sweat when I do it. And yeah, so that's kind of like how our classes are organized. Every session kind of goes to the same template, and we build on the skills as we progress in the class.
Right. Thank you for that addition. Let's look at the questions that are in the Q&A. So the first question is, I have mobility issues and can't run. Any suggestions for getting away when you can't do it quickly?
So I would let us think about it for a second. So I would pose the question back, but I don't know if that's appropriate now. And like, what do you normally use? I think that would be more appropriate for the class. But thinking about, like I said, thinking about what you do have available to you is really, really important. If you're not able to run, how are you able? You know, what skills or what are you using to find safety? And like I said, safety is not always finding a safe space. It may be using your voice and having other people come to you. It may be finding resources after something happens that can also assist with safety. So I'm not sure that I answered that question, but I'm hoping that if we were in a class that we would able to just talk about, you know, use the group to say like, what do you have? What do you use? What are you currently doing? And building upon that, as opposed to thinking about, you know, what you're not able to do.
That's great. And if the person would like to ask a follow-up question to that, you know, we probably have time to explore that as well. While we give some space for that, if that person wants to add more, let's go to the next question, which is, says, thanks for this training. I've heard recently a fawn response. Is this another type of response besides fight, flight, and freeze? If someone goes into a response, if someone's go-to response is fawn, are there tips for changing one's response to a more assertive no or get back? If someone's response is initially fawn, does it undercut assertiveness later on?
So I'm not sure that terminology. What's it, fawn?
My understanding of fawn, and this person can maybe add to it, is instead of somebody freezing or running or flee, yeah, all those things, fight, flight, or freeze, that somebody becomes kind of like Bambi, like I'm going to be sweet and compliant and kind of just those are bad words that I just used, but like kind of demure. So I think the question is, if someone's natural response is to be that way, are there ways to try to move into those more assertive places?
Yes, and we try to, you know, we try to get people to move into that space. And it can be a struggle for many people to move into a space of really centering your needs. We'd have some exercises where we put you in the place of a person who's aggressive or doing something offensive. And what people often find is like, it's really creepy to be that person. And when you think about the fact that like this person is violating your space or doing something offensive to you, and they've kind of overcome that level of like, this is weird. And you may be sitting there like thinking about their safety or not how to offend them. That you can hopefully move to a place of, you know, the fondness and move into a space of like, I'm going to center my needs, and that's okay. We have several exercises where we gain some skills, and I'll be sure to write down some notes to ensure that the trainers go over some of these, because oftentimes people take advantage of your niceness, or your whatever they're perceiving about you, and it often targets you for potential levels of harm from people that are, have predatory type behaviors.
Great answer. And I know that the fawn piece is coming up a lot more lately, and it's a really useful response. It's one of many different responses that we can have. So and it's hard to then move into some of those other more assertive places, either verbally or physically. So great to have that answer.
And I would like to add that the skills are like I've been training for 7 years, and there's so many times I'm in an environment where something happens and I'm like, I know what I should do, but I'm not doing it. It's so not about doing it right all the time. It's about knowing that, like, I know that I can do it. I know that I have the skills to do it. I may not always, be perfect and always assertive and always setting the boundaries, but I know that at the end of the day, I know that I can, as opposed to being reactive to things. I'm now have some levels of skills where I know I can be proactive. And so I say I advocate all the time. I have been doing this for so many years, and even days where somebody can do something, I'm like, oh, it's just about practicing and getting better at it and using your voice more. That's really the basis of, like, the foundation for the skills and building upon them.
Yeah, and what you just said, it sounds like, I mean, if somebody has a friend that's willing to practice with them or something so that they can get more used to saying no, doing those things that they've learned, that might help them shift out of that fawn space more quickly, as much as they can practice even more. So.
And one of the homework that we often leave people with is, it's the easiest homework, but it's very hard, is to say no to something. And it's just say no. And just see how it feels. To just, if someone says, do you want to go do something? No. And we have the person come back the next week and talk about what it felt like. Did you feel empowered? Did you feel frustrated? All of the different emotions that comes with just telling someone no, even if it's something that you want to do. Just having the homework and getting the skills and kind of moving from a place of, like, no, I don't want, to, like, no. It's so that I'll write that down. So that'll be one of the homeworks that we can provide in the 3-week training class.
That's cool. Thanks. Let me read the next question, the Q&A. So it says, if we can't create space and get away and we feel threatened, what can we do to regain safety? You mentioned we would then have to move into strikes, but if I am smaller, if they strike first, I'm in trouble. But if I strike first, I might end up with the assault charge.
Yes.
How would you recommend we manage the moment of escalation before the striking?
Yes. And I really understand that when you get to a fight, it can be very scary because you may not know the outcomes, right? You really don't know the outcomes. And that's why one of the tools that we teach can be go along until you get to a place of safety. That can sometimes be the best course of action. If you're in a situation where you're facing domestic violence or intimate partner violence, we don't advocate that you fight because it's not safe. It's not safe for you to strike, someone that's you're in a home environment. We do, advocate that, waiting till you can get a safety plan, get a safety course of action where you can get away from that person when it's a safer environment. And so one skill set that can keep you safe is go along until you can get to a safer space where you can get those resources, the people, the barriers, that space, like you said, the actual physical space you need to be safe. So there are times that we absolutely do not advocate violence. And domestic violence is one of those instances where it's probably not the best idea to strike somebody back. You probably want to wait for that person to leave, or you get some space where you can get to a real safe space.
Great. Thank you for answering that. Those are tough spots to figure out when it's okay to move forward and when we need to go along. And I love that phrase of go along, because it doesn't imply like I'm tolerating this or I want to tolerate this. It's just I'm going to go along until I can find a better space
Yes.
to be safe. Yeah, it's a really good phrase. Stephania, did any of the questions stimulate any other ideas that you'd like to share?
I'll touch on something really fast that I don't think we talked about, which is like why I teach. I started, Lauren pegged me to be a trainer, and I was kind of hesitant at first, and I did the 10-week course, and I came out of it like, it really changed my life. And it's like my testimony, you know, I did this 10-week course thinking I had all these skills and I'm so strong and, you know, all of these things. And I left that course literally lighter with relationships that I had to let go, definitely stronger, and way more empowered, and so many skills to use. And I started using them like immediately with my mom and my coworkers and relationships. And that's really why I teach. These are such great skills, and I really can't say that enough. You walk away, you're like, oh, that's really simple. It's kind of not, it's not that complicated, but it's also not something that many of us are taught. You know, we're taught to be nice. We're taught to go along. We're taught to, you know, kind of, you know, diminish ourselves in a sense. And the skills are very simple, but they're also very powerful. And after I left that 10-week course, and I was up like, you know, I'm a believer. I want to help teach these skills to other people so that we can just continue, you know, creating this space, creating this environment. Like you said, we want to live in an anti-violent world. And I think we get there. Well, I'm hoping that we get there one class at a time, and hopefully we can affect behaviors and affect how we respond to things. Like I said, de-escalation is really important. It's also like how we respond to things, modeling anti-violent behaviors, responding to stressful or, you know, triggering interactions, and modeling anti-violence and de-escalation techniques that other people can see and go, okay, wow, I didn't know that you could respond like that. Yeah, so I love teaching. I'm hoping that the participants that come to our 3-week class also can learn a lot of these skills, and in the 3 weeks, we're gonna build upon them, and they'll grow, and hopefully people can walk away with the life-changing experience that I had as well.
That's so cool. And I just, you know, I think I can't not think of what's going on in our world right now. And it's like so many of us feel so disempowered. So like if you left, you know, that first time feeling more powerful, what a great thing to, you know, have that feeling of confidence and powerfulness in a world where a lot of us don't feel that way, and where we're having a lot of rights taken away from us. So that is really cool. There's one more question that came in. So this person asks, what weapons do you recommend, if any, like a keychain weapon, monkey fist, pepper spray, taser? So what weapons, if any, do you recommend?
We as an organization don't necessarily advocate for any particular weapon, because often weapons will be used against you. However, we do think about, you know, what do you have with you? So like right now let's just say I'm in an office, I'm in my office bedroom, and I have scissors. So if I was in an unsafe space and I'm just looking around me, like what can I use that's near me that I can use? I don't know that I'd want to use this part, but I could use this part of the scissors to hit somebody. And so we think about the tools that you have near you. So if you're in your home, you're in your bedroom, you're in your workplace, you're in a public space, think about the resources that are most readily available to you. If you have a certain skill with pepper spray or batons, or I don't know, like weapons that you've been trained in, that you really know how to utilize really effectively, then, you know, you can use those as well. But if you don't have that necessary training, Oftentimes those can be potentially dangerous situations if you don't know how to use those tools. So we like to say, look around you, think about what you can use. Something as simple as your cell phone is really hard. If you hit somebody with that, that can be hurtful. I have a cup near me, I could use that. So thinking about what you do have available to you and not necessarily going out and buying like a knife, because we do live in a world where, especially, people of color, marginalized communities, you may not have that, niceness in the justice system where they're saying you as a victim. So yeah,
Thank
it's
you for
just
bringing that up.
some things to think
That's the first
about.
thing I thought about too. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, we don't live in a world that's fair for, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that was it. But yes, but think about what you have readily available to you. And if you have your keys, use your keys. If you have your purse or whatever you have, just look around you. It's really about noticing, opening your eyes to what's available to you, and to include your body if you have that as well.
Thank you. And again, this was really an intention of trying to just open the concept of what this is about, so that folks will hopefully be interested in participating in that 3-session course. Not sure when it's going to be yet. Lauren's not sure when it's going to be yet, but it'll be sometime maybe this summer, later this summer. And we'll go from there. But we will let people know when that's going to happen so people can sign up.
And I want to really encourage people to come to the training, because this is a webinar session where I'm just kind of giving some, like, introducing ourselves, but there's a lot of really great questions, and those can be addressed in the class when we break down into groups and can have these conversations where we talk about different abilities. We can adapt if we don't have the answer in that moment. We can do some resource checks before we have our next class and include that into the next agenda. So please come with your questions, with your different abilities, with your different skill sets, and pose those questions to the trainer so that we can assist in formulating different tools and action plans that you can use from wherever you're at.
Great, thank you. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you for like that wrap up of, it was a really great way to wrap up. So I wanted to make sure that you, Stephania, are thanked, because we're really appreciative of you being here, especially when you're on the East Coast in our later time zones. So thank you for being here and for sharing so much of your experience and your knowledge and all of those good skills. We really appreciate that, and I know that folks that are watching this later on are going to appreciate having this as a recording to watch later. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Stephania, for being here and being so smart and wonderful in your sharing and responses. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the work that you do as well.